Greetings everyone, peace to you all. Welcome to another episode of Praiseworthy Reviews, where we go through video games to see if they are excellent and commendable. Today we will be reviewing Esoteric Ebb, a Disco Elysium-like CRPG based on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition rules from solo developer Christopher Beauregard and published by Raw Fury. Players play as the Cleric, a lowly city official who is ordered to investigate the explosion of a local tea shop just 5 days before an election. As usual, we will be evaluating the game based on 5 criteria: fun factor, educational value, cultural value, spiritual value, and cost. For context, prior to this review, I have not played Disco Elysium, although I have played tabletop RPGs like Dungeons & Dragons, and I have finished this game to the credits. As far as the technical state of the game is concerned, the game basically ran without issues on my low-end work laptop. So without further ado, let's jump in. In many ways, Esoteric Ebb plays in the manner of the classic isometric RPGs implementing D&D rules, except without the combat. That is to say, it basically plays a lot like Disco Elysium. Gameplay is basically broken up into attempting exploration, dice roll skill checks, and social role-playing. In order to complete the main story quest of investigating the tea shop explosion, exploring the city of Norvik is necessary. There are quite a number of places to go, and to me, Norvik actually feels quite large in terms of the number of screens you can go to. In fact, I found myself often wishing that there was a map because it was not easy to remember which exits connect to what other screens. Even so, exploration is quite engaging because of the number of things to do, people to talk to, and treasure to find. There are tons of secrets to discover or new areas to engage in, but only if you are actively engaging in the other aspects of gameplay, like skill checks. Most encounters in the game are handled through skill checks, although there are no real skills, so perhaps it's more accurate to say ability score checks. They work basically the way that you would expect them to in D&D, with 6 types of checks in the standard strength, dex, con, int, whiz, and charisma system that we have come to know and love. Because I had heard that the game didn't really do standard tactical combat that is normally used in D&D, I decided to go do something that a min-maxer like myself would never do. I built a character with only mental stats, and no strength, con, or even dex. This actually was working out pretty well for me since combat is fairly minimal, and it was an interesting way for me to play the game. While combat is rare, it is present, and the combat that does exist often feels like they are, in fact, mini-boss or boss encounters. Even so, they don't follow typical D&D combat, and instead feel like a highly streamlined set of ability score checks that you do when attempting normal stuff, albeit with higher stakes. The bulk of the game, however, is in the role-playing and dialogue trees. In addition to the cleric as the POV character, he also engages in inner dialogue with his 6 abilities. Each ability is associated with a sort of stereotypical personality trait and a political affiliation. For example, strength is associated with masculinity and the Nationalist Party. Dexterity is associated with freedom, greed, and democracy, and so on. While it started off a little weird, it works surprisingly well. You would think that a game without combat would not have a lot of progression, but surprisingly, progression in the game can occur in many ways, all of which are D&D flavored or D&D adjacent, but not one-to-one. Role-playing and encounters can result in XP and leveling, like you would expect. However, the main benefits that you get for leveling up in this way are just additional ability scores, which occur every level instead of every 4, and additional spell slots and spell levels. Speaking of spells, the cleric can learn a number of cleric, wizard, and perhaps even other spells. Players can progress through acquiring more spells, many of which can be used to explore, create additional options for solving encounters, or even role-playing choices. Like D&D, acquiring gear is an important method of progression, although less important than normal in many ways. Nothing is explicitly needed, but many items can be quite helpful. Lastly, completing quests rewards the player with significant character development and equipable feats that act more like perks that you can swap out, which is obviously different from the standard way of progressing. I was worried that this would mostly be a visual novel type of game, but the systems in place are quite entertaining, and I always looked forward to every session I played. So, I'm going to give Esoteric Ebb 5 stars for fun factor. There is quite a bit of educational value to Esoteric Ebb. This is a CRPG and it's not real-time in any way, so there are no motor skills to be developed. That being said, there is a surprisingly large amount of conceptual knowledge to be learned. For example, as mentioned earlier, each of the ability scores corresponds with a political perspective, And despite some claims that the game leans heavily in one direction, I think it does a good job of critiquing many of the perspectives. In particular, the strength nationalist, Dex democratic and capitalist, and the wisdom socialist communist perspectives are the most relevant. And when having discussions, the writing does in fact highlight the weaknesses and strengths of multiple perspectives. I feel this way because I am playing with wisdom as my main stat, heavily socialist aligned, yet as I roleplayed more and more, I naturally moved towards dexterity aligned roleplaying options. Even though the factions and settings are fictional and in fact high fantasy, I think the game is able to at least intelligently convey the perspectives, even if there may be a sense of both sidesism here that would bother me in real life, but I am more okay with in the game, at least for the outcomes that I played. Besides this, the problem solving, creativity, and sheer number of options available here are quite good. There are interesting riddles, bad choices in the role-playing that you might be alerted to through successful checks, but could perhaps still guess, assuming that you are reading and paying attention. So while this is not strictly a puzzle-solving game, Ebb feels like an intelligent game, and it makes you feel intelligent for playing it. So I'm going to give the game 5 stars for educational value. The cultural value of Ebb is positive but inconsistent. The visual style uses a fairly simple cel-shaded but not anime look that I think works quite well, and the portraits seem to fit the isometric style. The UI suffers a little more. I liked the quest mind map but not the inventory icons. I liked the map background but not the journal entries. The animations are simple and well done, although sometimes they feel a little bit slow. The music is somber, minimalist, and a little weird, but it works while not being memorable or exceptional. There is no voice acting, which, while disappointing, is understandable given the overwhelming amount of text. It is the writing, however, where the game really shines. The narrative plot, while seemingly simple, unfolds in satisfying ways, especially given the openness of the game. The world building for the setting seems massive, with not only random boring lore entries, but with characters influenced by the fictional history or by their current politics, with each character aligned to at least one political party. The ending was quite satisfying and cathartic. At time of recording, about 1.5 months after launch, reception for the game has been quite strong, with an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam and incredibly good ratings on Metacritic and OpenCritic. No solid sales numbers have been provided, but there are various estimates that range from 130,000 copies to 210,000 copies. I don't know if Ebb will gain more traction as time goes on, but I do hope there will be a sequel or at least a spiritual successor to the game. Overall, I'm going to assign Esoteric Ebb 5 stars for its cultural value. As far as negative content is concerned, Esoteric Ebb is surprisingly clean. There's actually no sex, although you can attempt to flirt with and secure dates with some of the female characters. The writing is also filled with lots of double entendres and suggestive dialogue. While I wouldn't describe it as horny or even immature, the understated sexual humor is definitely there, if you are paying attention. There's a little bit of alcohol, as one of the areas you can visit is a tavern, but it doesn't necessarily promote drinking. Like the sexual stuff, there are some mushroom jokes and drug innuendo, but no real drug abuse. Violence is also surprisingly limited for a D&D game, but there are the usual fantasy and horror monsters and races that you might expect from a setting using the SRD. Language can be vulgar sometimes, but for the most part, it's more comedic than dramatic. Overall, there's a sense that this game is for adults, but it's not trying to be crass or titillating. Interestingly, there's not a lot of positive content necessarily, since many of the positive things can be missed, depending on how you roleplay the game. However, I do think that the game can be quite moral if you choose to roleplay that way. So that's pretty positive. There doesn't seem to be any ESRB or PGI ratings that I could find, but this is a game that is clearly meant for adults, even if it is mostly clean. Although the messages of the game can be positive, the game gives you so much choice that you can easily miss the important or good parts. So it's hard to feel that the game has a net positive spiritual influence. For more analysis on the themes of the game, check out my upcoming biblical themes video for this game. Overall, I'm going to give Ebb 3 stars for spiritual value. The time cost for a role-playing game, especially one with a lot of text and reading, can vary greatly. How much are you reading all the text? Are you clicking on every journal entry? Do you want to do most of the quests or do very little? Assuming that you do want to play in a rather normal way, trying to finish the story, for the time poor, Esoteric Ebb took me about 20 hours to roll credits. For the time rich, the game is pretty replayable because of the significant amount of choice and consequence in terms of the options that you have available to you based on your roles, how you build your character, and what choices you actually make. Esoteric Ebb retails for $24.99 USD at release, which feels like a fair but not great price for a solo indie effort. Overall, based on the content value, narrative accessibility, and asking price, I'm going to give Ebb 3 stars for cost. It's hard to believe that Esoteric Ebb is basically a solo developer effort, with only the art assets outsourced. The choice and consequence, role-playing options, and sheer volume of writing feels like too much for 2 people, much less 1. The game, while definitely esoteric, at the same time feels like it could be quite appealing to a broader audience if given a chance. While being a slower game, it's funny, clever, and a generally good time role-playing that reminds you of some of your best D&D tabletop sessions. Ebb is thoughtful and deals with serious themes, although due to its open-ended role-playing, perhaps it is less satisfying than a normal story. Still, I really enjoyed the esoteric experience. Based on the criteria discussed in the video, I subjectively assign Esoteric Ebb the rating of Genre Gem. That's all I have for you in this video. Bless you guys. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If this video blessed you in some way, please consider watching some of my other videos, subscribing, sharing the video with your friends, or sharing with me some of your thoughts in the comments below.